Hello and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 112th New Social Environment. I'm Nick Bennett and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation between Kendrick Arthur Kemp and Reverend Donna Schaper. We're also thrilled to have Song Bowie reading a poem to close today's program. A few notes before we get started. The Brooklyn Rail acknowledges that we are on the unceded territory of the Lenni Lenape, Canarsie, Shinnecock, and Munsee peoples. We acknowledge the many indigenous nations with ties to this land, and we recognize that the Lenape still call Mannahatta home. Finally, the Brooklyn Rail stands in solidarity with the uprising unfolding across the country following the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, Nina Pop, David McAtee, James Scurlock, Jamel Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Rayshard Brooks, Rhea Milton, Dominique Remy Fells, and Toyin Salau, and in response to generations of structural violence against Black communities. Black lives matter, and we will continue to support ongoing action in the struggle for racial justice. Before I introduce our hosting guest for the day, we would like to begin with a brief moment of silence. Thank you. And now to introduce our hosting guest for the day. Reverend Donna Schaper has been Senior Minister of Judson Memorial Church since January of 2006. She was formerly at Coral Gables Congregational Church in Miami, and before that at Yale University, and teaches leadership at the Hartford Seminary. As an elder, she is passionately concerned about leaving the next generation well prepared for all they have to face. She has written over 35 books, including her most recent book, I Heart Francis, Letters to the Pope from an Unlikely Admirer in 2016. And our guest today is Kendrick Arthur Kemp, who was raised in upstate New York in Lyons. Sorry. He earned a Master of Divinity from Union Theological Seminary and an MSW from Binghamton University. Kendrick was the founder and co-chair of the Disability Justice Caucus while at Union Theological Seminary. Kendrick was mentored by Dr. James Cone and Dr. Cornel West. Out of their theological wisdom, Kendrick constructed Black Liberation Theology of Disability. He sat on a panel at the American Academy of Religion titled Black Liberation Theologies of Disabilities. Kendrick has spoken around the country and the world at conferences. And with that, I thank you both for being here today, and I pass the mic over to you, Donna.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nick, and hi, everybody. It's great to see you on this beautiful August afternoon. I'm so happy we can be together, and then I can introduce you to my friend, Kendrick Kemp. Kendrick was a community minister at Judson Church. He there starred as someone who we thought was coming to learn from us and from whom instead we learned. And so I've just going to really enjoy letting you get to know him today as your teacher. Kendrick, you know what my first question is going to be. I want to hear about your father, the preacher. What was he like?
Yeah, thank you, Brooklyn Rail, for giving me this chance. Thanks, Nick. My father, well, we came up from down south Georgia in the 60s, and for a better life. So my father was a deacon at a church, then became a pastor. He was very, very strict. He introduced me to religion, spirituality, and faith. So he really helped me see what I'm doing now. And Lyons, New York is between Rochester and Syracuse. It's very rural. you know. So I saw all the turmoil he was going through while he was working and living in Lyons, and I saw that. I didn't have the words to put on it, but I saw the turmoils, you know, and how he had to dance with white supremacy, you know, and yeah, and he just kept his head down and just did what he had to do.
So the turmoil was racial. What was it like? What was his congregation like?
The congregation was like everybody was coming from different places. Lyons was in Wayne County, and that was a fruit county. Apples, pears, you know, and a lot of fruit. So people used to come from Florida and put apples and pears, you know, and so his church was very family oriented. Yes.
And I know it's a Baptist church because Kendrick is about to honor his family and become ordained as an American Baptist. So we're very excited about that. But let me just get a little more sense of what else it was like for you growing up. I know you were an athlete, and that's what the story about the stroke that then happened to you matters even more to somebody with great physical prowess. What kind of athlete were you?
Well, okay, Donna, before that, I gotta mention my father was a gospel promoter. So a lot of groups, you know, like the Mighty Clouds of Joy, Golden Keynotes, all these famous groups my father used to get. So they used to come to our house in buses, you know, when we was little, you know, and, you know, so I saw this, you know, how he networked, you know, how he did that, you know, so I picked that up too, you know, and sports was my sanctuary at a young age. We had a black baseball team. So I watched them play, you know, and how they mingled or they played ball and how they got along with each other, you know, and I made Little League I was 9 years old, and I made Little League, you know, and I was at a camp, a gospel religious camp, and they came and got me. It was like a hour and a half away, you know, the All-Star game. They came and got me, you know. All the kids was like, "Who is this guy?" You know, and I knew I had something in sports, you know, and so I played basketball, football, track, anything I can do in sports, I played, you know, and I won the states in basketball. And I made the 2 foul shots with the game. And so I love playing sports, you know, and I was like I was good at sports, but we practiced all the time, you know. But then at the age of 20, something happened to me. I had a stroke. And that changed my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what to do after I had a stroke. When I woke up in the hospital, you know, my lip, my face was drooped. You know, I couldn't walk, I couldn't talk. You know, I didn't want to live. I didn't know. I didn't want this body that I acquired from the stroke. So I really, really wrestled with God and life. You know, do I want to die? Do I want to stay? Do I want to stay here? You know, and I was, and then I started drinking and drugging, like every day after that. You know, and you know, people that looked at me different. I looked at myself different because I was a different person, and I didn't want that. So I battled with that for a long time, you know, trying to live in this new body. And I know the stigma around people who had disabilities. I didn't want that.
Yeah. So what happened? How did you get out? How did you get out of that obviously legitimate depression and huge bunch of losses? What happened?
My mom's love, you know, I remember she knew about this rehab, and she asked me to go, and I went. It didn't take, but I went anyway because I know I couldn't stay on the streets no more, because physically I couldn't do it. People were going through my pockets, you know, and I just couldn't do it. So for 5 years, I was going in and out of rehabs or detoxes. You know, the last time I went out and used my friend, they shot my best friend. That was a wake-up call. That right there, it was enough to get me into rehab for a last time. And that was 31 years ago.
Wow. Wow. Now, did I hear you right? They shot your best friend?
They killed him.
Who's they?
The drug dealers.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yep, it happens, right?
Yes.
I mean, tell us about your mom. What kind of person is she?
Very, very strong.
Yeah.
She came from a family worked the farm down south. You know, my grandfather, you know, he was he worked on the farm, and she helped her father pick fruit and really dealt with the pigs, all the farm work. She used to drive tractors, you know. So I saw her. She used to work hard, real hard. And the love she gave me.
Yeah. And she found you a rehab,
Yes,
which
you know,
matters.
and she never gave up on me because it didn't stick the first time, you know, but she never gave up on me, you know, so that love, that motherly love, you know, was there.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad. So Kendrick, you took this really terrible experience that happened to you when you were 20 and you turned it into a kind of movement. So I want to kind of switch to Black liberation theology, and if you could help us who might not know what it is. It's a particular kind of theology and a very interesting one. And then we'll talk about your extension of its great meanings to disability and what happens. So we've mentioned your professors. When did it start? What was the beginning of your understanding of Black liberation theology?
I just came out of the last rehab in Binghamton, and I started a church with Derek's band, and I told him I'm going up to Ithaca, New York, you know, and so I moved to Ithaca, New York, and every day I used to go up to Cornel, to Africana Center.
Nice.
So, because I was trying to find community. I was trying to find community, you know, and they got in Ithaca, there's a lot of used bookstores. So I went to a used bookstore. I went to the African American section, and I saw a book called Black Theology and Black Power by Dr. James Cone. And I was like, whoa, what's this? And I started reading it, and he was talking what I wanted to talk about. And he was like lifting up blackness. You know, he was looking at the Bible or in the light in the world through his own lens, his own lens, you know, and he didn't apologize for this, you know. I was like, whoa, this is what I need, you know. So I started reading all his work, you know, and it just empowered me.
Yeah.
You know, because I was down. I was really down. But that right there empowered me, and it woke me up. Gave me the courage to keep going.
So how did you finally got to Union and you got to study with him? You got to meet him. What was it like when you first met him?
I was a little scared, you know. But his writings, because his writings was so powerful. But when I met him, you know, his statue was different.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, he welcomed me. And I had the chance to really learn from him. He pushed me when I didn't want to be pushed. He you know, he gave me the language, you know, to talk about, you know, what I wanted to talk about. And I asked him about disabilities. I said, I don't see disabilities in your work. And he said, Ken, that's your calling. I'm like, okay, you know. He said I was writing, you know, in a time in about oppression,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But that's your word, that's your voice.
Hmm.
He really, really understood, you know, a person
Yeah.
has their own voice.
Yeah.
And he really tried to bring it out of me. Of all his students,
Yeah.
he tried to bring it out.
Hmm.
And I just took his platform of Black theology and I just instilled it into my work.
Hmm. So I'm going to give you a hard question now. And it's not in the script because I'm hearing all these accidents, you know, the accident of going into a used bookstore and finding a book that changes your life. The accident of complaining to Dr. Cohn, which I'm here to tell y'all not many people do, that there might be disability, something missing in his theology. And then he says, no, that's yours. So that's kind of an accident. What's your theology of accidents on the way to disability? I've heard you talk about this before, so it's not really a curveball.
No, I think, well, I know God's grace is always with me.
Hmm.
You know, and sometimes I go to my head to try to figure things out,
Right.
but I go back to the soul of it. You know, the source of it is God's grace.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and sometimes I don't have the words to put on that. His or hers grace.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was down. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed. I didn't want to live. But something happened. Something moved.
Hmm.
That was God's grace. It's helping me through the rough times.
Mm-hmm.
Did I answer your question?
Nobody can really answer that question. It's too big a question for an hour. But did you ever ask yourself, why me?
Yeah, but I didn't stay there.
Didn't stay there. Good.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I knew if I stayed there, I would go in depression.
Yep.
And I couldn't get out. You know, I would start drinking more and more. And, you know, the destruction.
Yeah. Yeah. The theology of accidents is, or do things happen for a reason? I don't think any of us know. We never can know. So you took up Dr. Cohn's idea and you began this thinking and writing and teaching about disability from a Black liberation perspective. So what's Black about it? Let's start there.
I looked through my own lens, my own spiritual lens, my own eyesight. You know, everything I do, I look through my lens as a Black person living with a disability. You know, so everything I do, I look through those lens. So the Bible, I look through my own lens, not the white scholar lens. You know, it doesn't work for me. You know, I use my experiences and I try to create a world that I can live in daily.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And because you are Black, of course, then it comes through that experience of culture and self. Why do you think some people get through these kind of awful things and other people don't? Is it that they have a mother who cares? Is it they walk into a used bookstore and find a book? Is what you're doing now, and obviously I'm answering your question for you. I think you make such a difference in the lives of so many people, Kendrick. I've never seen anybody who met you who wasn't changed by it. So what do you think helps people?
I know for me, I did a lot of inner work.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of inner work I didn't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I was going to support groups, you know, and for, you know, alcohol, drugs, you know, and then I went to other support groups for other things,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I think I know that helped me a lot, you know, going inside, you know,
Yeah.
dealing, you know, and then I had to ask myself certain questions. Why do I go back
Yeah. Right.
to this energy? Is this toxic?
Yes.
You know, I got a chance to have a conversation with myself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more conscious of myself, my behaviors, my attitudes,
Mm-hmm.
you know, by doing this important work. This is inner, you know, work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I met God again by
Mm-hmm.
doing it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just had someone say to me, I said something about inner work to her, and she said, I don't know where the inside is, Donna. I don't know where it is. I don't know where the bottom is. I don't know where the heart is. I know it's something missing in me about inner work, but I don't know how to get started. Did something help you get, I mean, I love what you're saying about support groups. So many people go to support groups and don't get the help they need, but there sure are a lot of people also who do get the help they need. And you can't do it by yourself.
Yeah, I know. I know that because I went to some support groups. I didn't get what I needed.
How did you know? How did you know it was working or not working for you? When do you walk?
It's the energy, and you know, I said, yo, this is not, it's not for me.
Right.
You know, and you know, and I just kept going because I didn't want to go back out there. I didn't want to go back to the streets or the life that I had. I couldn't survive. So it was very interesting because God was putting people in my path. You know, you know, like I might hear something, you know, and somebody say something, and they say, "Go over here, you know, check this out." You know, and I did. You know, so God was like moving in a mysterious way in my life. You know, cause my mind was open though. But if my mind was closed, I couldn't hear that.
Right.
Or see that, you know. And when I get fear, when I got a lot of fear running through my veins, I close my mind down. Or if I want something, I got an idea, you know, I want to do it this way. You know, I close my mind down because I already got, you know, something I want to do.
So since you're inside the disability movement in so many ways, you'll know the slogans if I sort of recite them. The one, nothing about us without us, which is something I really, really love. Organize it. And you're clearly working on behalf of so many other people with your work right now. But the one I'm most interested in is what I've learned from disability rights activists about this notion of heroism. And I'm going to ask you, Kendrick Kemp, are you a hero, or are you just an ordinary person who took advantage of the things that were there for you? In other words, if one of us, the 46 of us on the line here are thinking, well, I've got a disability too, and I wasn't able to overcome it, or I've got a drug or drinking habit, I wasn't able to overcome it, I didn't get the help I needed, I've failed at this. What made you, and I don't really think of you as a hero, but I do think of a lot of what you do as heroic. And I don't want people to think that they got to be a hero in order to be well. That's where I'm going. You know where I'm going.
Yeah. That's a hard question because I'm not a poster person.
Not yet.
You know, I don't want to be, because I know how hard it is living with disabilities. And there's visible disabilities and disabilities that's not seen.
Correct.
You know, so I know how you got to dance with it all the time. You know, I'm a person that you tell me I can do, I'm gonna do it. You know, so I never give up.
Well, that sounds like that sounds like the football player in you too, right?
Yeah, you know, and I had some good mentors in my life, and they always, a lot of them did social justice. You know, so it just, I just picked that I just picked it up. It just kept on going.
Yep.
You know, and the life is hard.
Do you want to say anything about how you got through Union and what great writers, helpers you had, and what happened when somebody at Union thought that your papers were too good to have been written by you?
Yeah. This opens up a bigger conversation on every school
Exactly.
I went to.
Yeah.
They always had to defend myself.
Yeah.
They, you know, I wasn't intelligent enough to write like this.
Right.
So you must have somebody else writing this. or you plagiarizing this, you know. So every school I went to, you know, I had that kind of stuff always happening.
Right.
I had to defend myself. So I remember going to Binghamton University, and every class I had to talk about my apraxia. Apraxia is a language disorder. After having a stroke, you know what you want to say, but you can't say it, you know? And so I used to get up in front of the class and talk about that. Just trying to give them some resources for themselves. And so it's tiresome. It's very tiresome doing that, that kind of work. And you want to put your best scholarship out there. You know, Union Theological Seminary, they tried to kick me out. Donna, you went to the meeting, you know, and Michael, he was there, my writing partner, and 4 of their lawyers. And they was questioning me about my work. And the first thing ran through my head is, here we go again. I'm ready for y'all. You know, come on with it. Let's tackle this. But the person said I plagiarized didn't even show up. You know, and I had talked to Dr. Cohn and Dr. West earlier. And they was behind me, you know, and that's what I learned. I can't do it by myself. I can't have my own voice out there. I have to have a community. And that's what I got.
Sorry, just
I
a
can't
moment.
hear you.
Sorry, just
Unmute
there we
myself.
are. Okay.
Yes, there. I had to mute myself because I had a disability develop. My computer decided it was at 10%. And so I just crawled under the desk and got it hooked back up. So anyway, you can imagine what it was like to be either, you know, how we preach parables, the little stories that Jesus tells. This really turned into a parable because Michael Kendrick's absolutely brilliant writing instructor knew how to walk through the papers that were being questioned and talk about them. It was an amazing thing to see. And then the people in the room, the lawyers and the professors, made Kendrick say whether he knew what he was talking about. Now, it was just excruciating in a way, but it was also, I would call it heroism, Kendrick, the way you got angry carefully. Let's put it that way. Angry carefully. It's a little bit like John Lewis talking about good trouble, you know?
Yeah,
It is.
I know. One of the lawyers, they sent me a memo on my thesis project. They said they sorry they can't come, but do your best
Mm-hmm.
in this project. So that memo, it just helps me keep going. And knowing that people don't know. People have biases or they're just ignorant about certain things, you know, and just, you got, teach them if you can.
Right. And look, people also have principles, especially in academic institutions. And plagiarism is one of the principles, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a complex principle. I might call it a high class principle, but that's another question. I don't want to, I understand what they were trying to do. So what's it like? And now, Kendrick is at Howard University Divinity School right now. What's it like there for you?
Lonely, very lonely. I'm not getting the resources I need to write, do my work. So I'm transferring to Syracuse University next year.
All right.
I know Syracuse has a great disability resources because I did my undergrad there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going back there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you'll be with your family?
Yes, my mother and my two sisters stay in Syracuse.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Cool. Well, is there anything else you want to add, Kendrick? And I'm going to open it to some questions, I think.
I want to talk about disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
It's not foreign.
Mm-hmm.
People living with disabilities was always with us.
Yes.
I'm just, now we including them more and more.
Mm-hmm.
Getting our voices out there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a different time in history too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We got, instruments to do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it goes back as far as Jesus, the lame, the deaf, the blind, we've even changed that word lame into something that has a kind of spiritual meaning. Well, that was really lame, what you just said. And maybe that's politically incorrect, but I don't know if I really care. I mean, let me tell a story about pulling my Achilles tendon playing tennis once when I was about, 50 something. I pulled it right before the United Church of Christ National Synod, which is our meeting that we have every other year. And I had to go to Providence, Rhode Island. And I showed up in a wheelchair and everybody acted so weird to me. I was dying. Oh my God, are you okay? Can I push you? And it was all fine. when I explained that it was a temporary injury. But I wondered if it had been a permanent injury, if I was going to be treated like that the rest of my life. So that was the experience. But then I had to wheel myself around Providence, the city, and there were no curb cuts at that time in Providence. And I wrote this thing called My Week in a Wheelchair. That really was an amazing experience because those curb cuts meant everything to me. Every time I had to get out of the damn chair, walk it across the curb, get back in it, it was killing me. And so I couldn't go anywhere. And then the people would either walk right by you and sort of say, oops, you're really in the way. Could you get back in your chair now? You know, or they would be pathetically helpful. Oh, my dear child, you know. And I didn't know which I hated worse, but I congratulate the disability rights movement for curb cuts, writing teachers like Michael, state and national laws that say if a man like Kendrick wants to go to school, he can get the kind of help he needs and he can get the kind of education he needs. And I think you're really right that we are moving, that this is a progressive victory in the making and certainly not there. But without, why should people who are lame not have curb cuts?
Yeah, you know, just like, thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah.
I know there's something about the world we live in. We don't want to, if you don't fit the prototype of that community,
Right.
they're not going to let you in.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know, you got to ask to come in.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know, yeah. You know, so sometimes I don't ask. I just come in. You know, you know.
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's a daily thing you gotta do.
Yeah.
You know, and I look at the children has disabilities. They're so innocent. You know, and they get swallowed up by, you know, this world. They don't have the right people around them.
Yeah.
You know, I see it all the time. You know, but there's a lot of people is doing good work. And I'm doing just like Black Lives Matter movement. You know, I did a presentation and I said, if Black disability lives is not included, we can't talk about Black Lives Matters. You know, because it's not, you know, the whole platform. Because Black lives living with disabilities is in every group of Black people.
Yep.
You know, I mean every group. You know, and so we have to, you know, share our experiences and, you know, make our voices known. You know, and that's what we're doing. You know, I just do it under a theological, you know, frame work. You know, that's what I do.
That is what you do. So we're going to move to questions. I'm going to say one more thing about this whole matter in general of disabilities. Many of you know that Judson Memorial Church is a very progressive institution. Our slogan is open in so many ways. And we have the great embarrassment of having an elevator, or it's really a lift, that doesn't work. And I just want to tell you the story and tell you how it makes us feel very briefly. When in 1995, we put in a lift so we could get to our second floor, which is our main meeting room, the place where postmodern dance was founded, the place where we worship, the place where we removed the pews in 1969 so that we could be open to lots of community groups. So if you're lame in any way, you have to use that lift. Well, the lift got broken the way a lot of us get broken. It was used too much. it had all its hair rubbed off, like in the story about the bunny. And we used it too much because we carried sodas and wine up into the meeting room for all these parties we were always having with and ourselves and other people. So we broke it. It kind of works every now and then. And now that we're no longer worshiping or in the building physically, we've sort of stopped the haste with the push on getting a new elevator in there. We're going to replace it this time with an elevator so we can carry all kinds of stuff up, and we're going to get an extra floor out of it. And eventually that's going to happen. But we're not in the building right now for all the reasons we know so well. But I think Kendrick and I would both say that what's really bad about the lift and elevator not working is that it puts the lie to all of our other progressive thoughts, right?
Yeah.
It makes us look hypocritical as an institution. We're for this, we're for that. We're for everything that's good and right and true. We're for everybody. And we want social justice, economic justice for all. And then if you show up in a wheelchair and we have to carry you up the steps to get you in, what's that about? And I think that there's a metaphor in our experience that is very important, which is you can't just say you're for it. You got to build elevators. You know, that's the deal. So let's take some questions. Nick, what you got in the chat? I'll look too, but you want to list them out?
Of course. Kendrick, Donna, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing this conversation with us. It's indeed been informative and uplifting. And I do want to mention one comment from the chat, Kendrick. Keith A. Alford, one of your former professors at Syracuse, he thanked you for your conversation today and said that Kendrick is an inspiration and a scholar and is making a positive difference. So I agree with Keith, and I thank you both for this talk. I do have a couple of questions lined up. I'm not sure with the time we have if we can get to all of them. Thank you everyone also for sending me direct messages and messages in the chat. The first question I'd like to go to is from our own contributor, Anne McCoy. Anne, I'm going to pass the mic off to you. You should be able to activate your mic now.
Oh, great. First of all, Kendrick, this has been such a moving presentation. I can't tell you. And I identified so much as someone, I just celebrated 49 years sober, and as someone, you know, who had a huge problem with alcohol and drugs, and was also sort of safe. I sort of had a light on the road to Damascus experience, strapped to a gurney in graduate school. You know, so I certainly believe in faith and in how faith moves one's life. And I'm very deeply touched by what you said. I'm finding, I mean, right now we're seeing huge social unrest. We're also seeing mass addiction, thousands of addicted homeless people everywhere, and not homeless people who are suffering from addiction. And at the same time, it makes me sad because I'm still practicing, and it makes me sad that we're also seeing this huge assault on Christianity. I mean, every day, you know, there's another Virgin Mary statue with the head broken off, or a church vandalized, burned. My entire neighborhood is full of Coptic Christians and who are fleeing for their lives. So I really, it makes me sad right now that in terms of the art world and in terms of just the general collective, that it seems like Christianity has been pretty trashed. And the people, I think of the Black churches, I think many of these institutions is really the key with the whole civil rights movement, and that the idea of faith is so important. And I was very deeply touched by this. I mean, what can we do about this? I feel that, I don't know, I just feel that it's so key, because I don't know how to move forward with a political movement or with recovering from addictions without a commitment to some kind of real, what you called inner work and I would call inner work, and on something larger than ourselves. I'm going to let you go.
Thank you for the question. And it's hard, you know, seeing, like, for me, I don't dive into too much news, because it's too much for me, you know. But I know the way that we dealt with things in the civil rights era. You can't do it today. It's a different, we're in a different history, you know. So the rituals, you know, the way we worship, you know, we have to, you know, step back and change that. You know, it's not working in a lot of places, you know, and that's what I do a lot, self-inventory, you know, seeing what I can use, you know, and as I'm doing enough, you know, because we in a time in history, it's a lot of darkness, you know, and you can get overwhelmed with that, you know. So I ask myself, you know, certain questions, and I do certain things. I you know, sometimes I don't go to the church, or I just talk to people as people. Is I'm answering your question?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I mean, yesterday was the 19th, so for us, because we're on the old calendar, yesterday was the Transfiguration, which is probably the biggest light, you know, there is in the Christian world. You know, when it all goes up into a big ball of light. And I was thinking, you know, as I went to church for the Transfiguration, and I was thinking, God, I'm sure that like most people in the world don't know what that is. And it's sad that in the collective, people no longer, the way they did probably when there were big frescoes everywhere, have an understanding of that symbolic, of what that means symbolically, or what that means as an idea. And I feel somehow that by removing all of these symbols, things like the nativity, no matter what religion you are, the idea of a divine birth, whether it's the Buddha or Christ, by removing some of these potent archetypal symbols or incredible ideas concerning faith that can be translated into many religions even at times, that I feel like we've replaced them with the Kardashians and a kind of dead secularism.
Yeah, you know, in materialism, all that stuff is coming at us, you know, every day. I mean, you know, and people are so, excuse me, I know maybe I have to look inside and say, well, the old ways, it's not, it worked for a time, but now I have to really do some gut-wrenching work in my soul. Maybe I have to look at redeveloping, my spiritual life, because it worked for a time, but now in history, we have to create another way how to live. I don't think nothing's wrong with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it's great having that
Mm-hmm.
the freedom to do that.
Yeah. I really appreciate your saying that, Kendrick. I was putting in the chat that I think people of faith have really given ourselves a bad name and turned faith into one of those shouldy, you're a naughty person kind of word. Valerie, Holly, I see you're here with us, and just say something about faith. What do you think about faith? Are you with Kendrick on maybe having to go another route on things?
Hi, thank you, Donna. Hi, Kendrick.
How you doing?
I'm good. No, I am a faith person. And one of the things that happens for me, especially since I have a lot of similarity with you, Kendrick, being also a social worker. I went to the school across the street from you, though, in NYTS, New York Theological. And the other thing is, I had a situation some 20 years ago where all of a sudden I stopped walking and talking for 8 months because I have an autoimmune illness. And so I also came from the Baptist church. I also had a spiritual mother. And what happened for me, I did spend every once in a while, within those 8 months, I would do that, why is this happening to me thing? And then it'll last, like you said, maybe 2 minutes or so. And then I say, that's where my faith kicked in, my background. And then I said, well, wait a minute. Excuse me, I don't want to offend anybody. But then I would say, wait a minute, you are a stupid person. Because guess what? You may not can get a bus, or you may not ever run again. However, you are still moving. You may not be able to do, my lungs are kind of blocked. So the doctors tell me, even to this day, 20 years later, and yet I'm still breathing though. And so what faith does for me is help me look at my own history and help me look at the times that God has shown up in the midst of trouble, in the midst of madness in my own life, and certainly when we're dealing with it in the world. And I had to recognize, wait a minute, I need to go back to what I believe to be true and trust my heritage, trust, you know what? 20 years ago, you really could have died, but you didn't. And in those 8 months, I don't know when my voice came back. I had to relearn how to walk and all that stuff with a physical therapist because my muscles had atrophied. The point I'm saying is the faith allowed me to say that every day was a gift. Even on days when I'm very sad. I still had to say, but it's a gift, Valerie, because you didn't really have to be here. So I have to trust my faith and my lineage of faith. And yeah, like your mother, my mother kind of instilled that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie, so much for your input here. I do want to pass the mic off now to another person in the audience, Martha Gottwals. I'd like to pass the mic to you. You should be able to activate your mic now.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
Great.
I have to do a confession that Donna is my pastor and Kendrick is my friend. But being an evil person, I've never asked you this before, Kendrick, and it kind of goes from where Valerie started and then to a different place. Given the trajectory of your life experience, okay, number one, what made you decide that you wanted to pursue the ministry and the church? And number two, what inspired you to want to make a difference?
Thank you, Martha. Nice to see you.
Always.
I remember growing up, and my friends used to come and get me and just to talk on certain things. They just like to be around me, you know, because I listen, really listen, you know, and I didn't take on ministry first time. I got a bachelor's in social work. I got a master's in social work. So I was really trying to stay away from ministry, you know, and but it came back around. It was in me. I wanted to help, you know, in a spiritual way, you know, and you know, so by doing that inner work I did, I can, you know, help others. If I didn't do that inner work, it would have gotten my way, you know. But doing that work, it really showed me what's my vocation. You know, helping others. You know, I did that, you know, by community work. I did it in social work. I always helped others. You know, I love it to be able give something of myself. Did I answer your question?
Sorry, just one moment. There you are, Martha.
All right. Had to wait to be able to unmute. Yes, you did. And thank you. As I said, I never asked you that as long as we've been friends. And it's really inspiring to hear what you have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Our next question comes from our own Rail staff member and managing editor, Charlie Schultz. Charlie, I'm passing the mic off to you.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Kendrick, and thanks, Donna. This has been a very deeply moving conversation. Kendrick, I'm very thankful to have had you on the broadcast and to have had the opportunity to listen to your story. One of the things that was coming up in my mind as you were answering questions from Anne McCoy and from some of the other people who have kind of talked about the distinction between the ministry and the social work. And I wonder, you know, when you were talking to Anne, you said you like to talk to people as people. And so I just kind of wonder, you know, as you've committed to the ministry, how you go about, how you mean people as people, I guess is the bottom of my question. And how you help people who don't have a sense of faith. Yeah, those are my two questions.
All right, thank you. I don't have a set agenda. I go I let the person lead me. You know, I know to be genuine, you know, just be there where the person is at. You know, they don't have to believe like I believe. You know, just being there is enough, because I knew when I was out there, sometimes people just you know, just listen to me, and that's all I wanted. You just listen, and sometimes just be there. You know, I think we say a lot by just being in the space. We don't have to say nothing, but if we show up, you know, in the space, you know, and let a person just live, you know, that's saying a lot. You know, did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much, Kendrick. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Our next question, thank you, Kendrick and
Yeah.
Charlie, for that question. Next, I would like to pass the mic over to Kim. So just one moment. Kimberly, you should be able to activate your mic now.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Kendrick, thank you so much for your self-honesty and your account of your journey. And I can tell both you and Donna do great work. I was a social worker also, and I'm heartened by you. I sort of had, well, at least 3 areas I wanted to ask you about. One would be, but this is a long conversation about the great creativity that it seems takes place in the impulse in the Black community to start churches. You know, I think it's a very cool thing, and I think that would be a very interesting conversation at some point. It's probably going to go beyond the bounds of today. But the primary question I had for you, or thought I had, was what do you think about the formulation that all of us, most of us, have a deep psychic disability, and a third of your life perhaps you don't know of it, maybe another part of your life you suppress that or knowledge of it, or you hide it, and then God willing, you're lucky enough in later years you become aware, much more self-aware, and you might come from a perspective of, you know, God, I'm deeply flawed. And then there's all that work that you have spoken so movingly about. I guess it just occurred to me during our talk that concept could be seen as a disability, but I don't know if thinking in that way, it faces the very real material body challenges of having a disability. So just throwing that out there.
I've been thinking about mental illness a lot while we've been talking, and what kind of disability it is. It's interesting.
I wasn't even
because I, you know, just like Donna was saying, we don't even, a lot of times we don't even talk about mental illness because we don't even know how to talk about it. We don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't want to deal with it.
That's right.
You know, yeah. So, and that's another conversation, you know.
I would even hazard a comment that most of us probably are challenged by and struggle with these kind of fractures and deep issues, deep spiritual issues. And it goes, it's not even necessarily mental illness. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm not even, I've started to really question some of those categories.
And then it goes to identity too.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to be seen as, a normal person, I'm not gonna I'm gonna hide it until I can. Until I can't no more, because it really, affects my identity, and then the power, the class, all that stuff is in my identity.
What you've offered us today, I would say, just to this small group, is very liberating for us, though, because you embolden us to admit our own struggles, our own internal struggles, and that to know that we have an ally in that soul work that you mentioned. So thank you so much for that, because that makes the world a little bit less lonely, right?
Yeah. I think everybody's got living with a challenge. Everybody is, Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kim, and thank
Thank you.
you, Kendrick. If I may be greedy, I may ask the last question today. And first of all, thank you again for sharing all of this insight. And it's really important for those without disabilities, I think, to be, to educate themselves and to be allies. And Kendrick, one thing from your perspective I'm curious about in taking, your story and everything you've mentioned, and even Donna, as you were talking about your week in the wheelchair, as of course we're leading to an election this fall, are there resources or that people without disabilities can be aware of in the struggles that people with disabilities face when it comes to voting, as a means for us to educate ourselves and to help those with disabilities to assist so that everyone gets the chance to vote? It's an expansive question, but I'm curious.
You in New York, so Donna probably know more, but there's information out there. And I think the mayor has a disability group. I think he does. But Donna probably know more about that.
Well, I was going to say that another big learning from the disability rights movement is that we all have a disability, and that some people who have, quote, visible disabilities have extraordinary abilities as well, right? So there's this back and forth thing that happens. Then there's also, in this election, I think everybody's got a disability. We've lost trust in our leaders. There is such an amount of crap happening. I can't think of a better word. There's so much that's going on that's going to make the franchise prohibited or risky for people in certain groups. It's a remarkable setting to think about it. So if you're already, let's see, if you need to get a car to drive you to a polling place, it's got to be a certain kind of car that you can get into, right? I mean, so as I think is usual, people with visible disabilities are doubly messed with. That's how I would put it. Or triply.
And Nick, you live in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
They got the Independence Center in Brooklyn. You could get a lot of information from the Independence Center about voting. And they would love to, give you that news.
Absolutely. Thank you for pointing me to that resource. I'll share a link in the chat to the, I believe that's the Brooklyn Center for Independence, right?
Yeah. I think every borough has an independence center. Yes.
Well, that's great to know. And I encourage everyone tuning in and those that watch this when it's on YouTube at this point, that, look at your local resources and see how you can help yourself and everyone around you. So I apologize if I'm overthinking, but thank you again, Kendrick, Donna, everyone for your questions. This has been a really informative and important conversation. And I think that's a great frame to consider this, what Donna and others mentioned, that every person to some degree has a disability, whether it's visible or invisible. So thank you for your compassion and your words today. We have a tradition here at the Rail of ending our conversations with a poem, and we are very lucky today to have our very own publisher and artistic director, Fong Bui, to lead the question with some final comments and a poem for all of us. So Fong, I'm going to pass the mic over to you.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Kendrick. Thank you, Donna, and all the questions that was asked. I couldn't help but to think of the years ago in the early 90s, I undertook an effort to study Paul Tillich, who taught at the Union Seminary here at Columbia University in the 30s and the 40s. And the two books that I read, as I remember, one called The Dynamic of Faith, and the other one is Courage to Be, all written in the 50s, I think. And, I was interested in Tillich because he was a Lutheran Protestant theologian who also explored an equal term in Christian existentialism. And I remember once of the transcript of an interview where he was asked, what is faith? If you can apply it to everyday life, let's say a sport, because I'm thinking of you started out early in career as a football player, Kendrick. And the question was, the answer was, if Babe Ruth's ultimate aim, fate in life is to hit as many home run he can, would that be regarded as fate or some kind of religious commitment? And the answer was yes, absolutely. So it have a different kind of, I would say, meaning. It doesn't have to be all interpreted in one-dimensional readability, whatsoever. But I'm thinking of Tillich, and then I'm thinking of all of my favorite bluesmen, from the 20s, 30s, the 40s, Reverend Gary Davis, Blind Willie Johnson, Blind Willie McTell, Blind Lemon Jefferson, all of them, all of my favorite were blind musicians. And it was very common in those days, if you're born blind as disabled child, you have a terrible burden because you couldn't go to work on the farm like your brother or sister. So early on, you develop a desire to play an instrument, either entertain your family and not, or eventually that was your own way of mediating the world, And why I'm saying all this, because it's ultimately leading to a poem that I'm going to read to end our lunch conversation today, partly also related to Helen Keller. When I read her autobiography years ago, it's called The Story of My Life. That was published in the 20th century. Essentially, it was her relationship with her teacher, Anne Sullivan. You guys probably remember it was made into a movie, several versions, but the one that I remember seeing was The Miracle Worker, where Anne Bancroft played Anne Sullivan. Patty do play Helen Keller. As you know, she was first deaf-blind person that earned a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from Radcliffe College. And it's so interesting. The person who was impressed by the book when she was in there, in fact, it was Mark Twain who paid for tuition. So this is it. It's somehow tied to Gordon Parks. I don't know why, Charlie, because we lately been quoting Gordon Parks a great deal because he once say, enthusiasm is the electricity of life. How do you get it? You act enthusiastically until it becomes your habit. It's a lovely phrase. So I'm reading a poem written by Gordon Parks' mentor, Langston Hughes. It's simply named Helen Keller. See, in the dark, found light brighter than many ever see. See, within herself, found loveliness through the soul's own mastery. And now the world receives from her dower the message of the strength of inner power. Thank you. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kendrick. Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Fong, for that poem and for closing it out. I want to thank you all again for joining us today. We have these conversations every day at 1 p.m. We tomorrow will be joined by our Braille editor-at-large, Toby Camps, with over 20 recent MFA graduates from London tuning in to talk about their work and what an MFA graduate faces in the age of COVID. So with that, I thank you all again, and you can you can activate your mics at this point if you would like to say hello, goodbye, or share any thoughts, and have a lovely day, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Kendrick.
Thank you, Kendrick.
Donna.
Thanks, Kendrick and Donna.
Bye
And
bye.
Valerie.
Thanks.
So much. And Fong, all of y'all.
Thanks,
Thanks for being so
Martha.
active in the chat, everyone.
It's nice to meet the new ones of you.